machine wants another login here.
You should know, no, it's all good. We're all ready to go.
Okay.
Nothing changes. We're now.
For you, it doesn't change anything.
We're now here with the audience. So, yeah, just to welcome everybody, all our participants, and everybody to our. I have to count on my fingers now. We're now in the 8th of 9 webinars this week on different topics as part of our Stronger, Safer Together campaign. So, welcome to this session on ensuring our aircraft are airworthy. A really great, important session. We've got some great panelists. My name's John Franklin. I'm head of safety promotion here at EASA, and I've been kind of leading everybody logistically through this week of webinars and events. Before I hand over to my colleagues, I'm just going to quickly do a few logistic things and just some important bits that kind of set the scene for what we're doing here. Probably one of the most important things to mention for this session, and all of the sessions, is we set up these webinars to share experiences and discussions about the challenges we have as organizations and across the industry. It's not specifically the views or the position of the organizations that are involved in taking part. It's just part of an evolving conversation. So please, don't take anything that's said here as positions of the organization specifically. It's all about learning and sharing experiences and seeing how we can improve and work together to improve safety. So that's kind of the first important thing to mention. From a logistical point of view, we've all been on those Zoom calls where somebody's forgotten to unmute themselves or to mute themselves, and then you get boiling the kettle and the cat and all sorts of other things. So the way this WebEx webinar system we use works is that all of the you as attendees, all of the cameras are off and all of the microphones are muted. It's kind of a default setting, so it makes life a lot easier. So if you're trying to unmute and wonder why, that's why. But there are lots of ways or various ways you can interact, and we really want this to be as interactive as we can, given that we've got a few hundred people, etc., joining different sessions. So what you should find in the apps area in the bottom right hand corner of your screen is an apps area with Slido, and at various points we have some polls and things that we'll be running that will pop up, and please engage, and we don't attribute any answers to anybody. It's just great to get feedback and get particular points and thoughts and things like that as we go through the session. And then you can also go into the Q&A part and put your questions in. You can upvote other people's questions. So if somebody else asks something you agree, you think, oh, that's really interesting. Obviously we take questions as much as we can in priority order. So it pays to upvote things you think are interesting. If you have any technical problems and you want to talk to me as the host about sound not working or whatever, and you need any advice to make the best out of the session, please use the chat function. Again, there's the chat box in the bottom right hand corner. Drop me a message. I'll put various links as they come up to different resources as they come up during the discussion as much as I can. Other than that, we're recording this session. We'll put it out on the community site probably tomorrow or Friday, and we'll also drop everybody an email who's participated in the event, so you know where the different resources and material are to help you through all of the sessions. So that's the logistics side of things. Hopefully you're here, we'll have a great discussion and learn a lot together and kind of go on this journey. So I'll hand over to my colleague Eugenia, who's going to take you through as the host of this session. Thanks.
Thank you, John. Welcome to this webinar. It's really a pleasure to be the moderator of this webinar. Do you know the title of the slot is Ensuring Our Aircraft Are Airworthy. It's always nice. It's an important topic always, but yeah, what is relevant, more relevant to have this discussion today? What can we really offer as an added value for having this discussion today? In our view, it's a good moment to reflect on safety, considering the last 2.5 years, all the difficulties we went through that time, and all the new challenges in the environment, which is continuously changing. We want to explore as well on how different organizations working together, coordinating together, they can improve safety. So, in short, answering my first question, we can offer to you as participants in this webinar an added value in reflecting on the past, but looking towards the future. So that's the main point of today's discussion. We are not alone in EASA today for this reflection. We are honored on having with us some distinguished guests. Allow me to introduce our panelists today. We might have the slide, please. We have first Arnold Hosler and Paolo Pestana. Allow me to say a few words. Arnold Hosler is the Senior Director of Quality and Standards Technical Fleet Management in Lufthansa Group. He has been working with EASA as participant in the expert group for the One Camo. You might know that very recently the One Camo regulation was published and it is already in place. So yes, he was one of the key contributors together with the other experts in that discussion. He has more than 25 years of experience in aviation in different posts. And yes, I will highlight this aviation enthusiast that Arnold put on his bio as an important topic. Thank you, Arnold, for being there. Welcome.
Thank you.
Paolo Pestana is our another distinguished guest today. He's Camo Regulatory Manager in NetJets. He is responsible for Camo compliance with EASA and UK CAA regulations. He has more than 35 years of experience in aviation. And allow me to highlight that he is the EBAA member for the technical advisory bodies for EASA. So he is contributing with EASA towards prioritization and looking forward. So thank you to you both to be here. A very warm welcome. And yes, I suggest we are ready for starting the discussion. These coming minutes, we will use some slides that Paolo and Arnold will use, trying to answer three main questions that we already identified. The three main questions are, how would you describe the post-COVID world in aviation? What are the specific challenges in safety management? What has helped your organization to successfully manage the COVID crisis? So, yes, now we are ready. Keeping in mind these three questions, I give the floor to Arnold. Please, can we start with your presentation? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Eugenia and John, for the introduction. And again, good afternoon from my end, from the home of Lufthansa Group in Frankfurt. Happy to interact and liaise with you on this topic Eugenia just introduced. Generally a pleasure to share my perspective and Lufthansa Group's perspective. Lufthansa Group being a group of airlines, 10 brands, 12 AOCs soon, nowadays 11. So in a way, tribute goes to the contribution of my friends and colleagues across the safety and compliance team in the Lufthansa Group. I just have the pleasure to share some of these insights with you and really, truly looking forward to have a good discussion afterwards. All around safety aspects and recovery or the ongoing crisis. And it's three slides. I think about this topic we could speak all afternoon, but yeah, I'll try in like three perspectives. First of all, COVID, what's the state of the union or the state of the aviation sector? And maybe we can flick to the next page. And well, let's call it it's a pulse line of what the crisis has felt to us, and probably very similar to many of your organization and maybe also personally yourselves. Unprecedented crisis COVID has been in the Lufthansa world. Here, looking at passengers was the key KPI to look at. some of you might know, but towards the end, 2018, 19, 20, at least on Lufthansa Group side and for most of the sector, have been very successful years, ranking in highs in both commercial result, but also in passengers. And then came this abrupt shutdown. In our case, actually to 1% of passengers on board compared to 2019. So unprecedented is the word. We've all seen that in press, but in numbers, every time I look at this chart, gosh, I mean, how have we survived this? It clearly felt like a roller coaster, shutting down that fast, grounding close to 700 aircraft. Some of our ACs were grounded as in aircraft flying totally, literally not one single plane, some on a very basic roster, staff all of a sudden out of job, parts and etc. and simple survival modus. And an abrupt change already hints towards safety management of change. So going down was the first change. Then you see that little hump up. First hopes about summer. The first summer in 20, not quite huge, but totally unclear outlook. Back to winter again, and you see the waves up. Zooming to situation right now, where the yellow bubble is, 85% traffic outlook in summer. In our case, sometimes even more. Some of the airlines even operating at higher levels than, especially in the touristic sector, than pre-crisis, which is awesome news. Just the challenge, it came as abrupt and overnight as the downturn. Of course, we always wanted the business to come back, but you can just have too much or too little, I guess. It will never be right. And again, changes the story. And what comes on top in this new normal, and in our case, we kind of declared COVID phase is over now. It will probably not ever be gone, but the formal COVID crisis, we declared it over, and there's now new challenges, geopolitical challenges, looking towards the east, ops performances to sustain operations after such a sharp rise, and many challenges that go with it. But the main challenge actually is we don't know, or we know less than probably ever before what the plan. Yeah, so what used to be strategy maybe 2-3 years, now strategy is maybe 2 weeks or 3 months at best, and the new normal is volatility. So you can complain about this, but at the end of the day, I think we have to accept, at least for the time we can look ahead, that flexibility is the name of the game, or volatility from the market, which give us some challenges. So good outlook, back in business, but the world is somewhat different, definitely volatile, and how to manage it. Let's have a look into some of the preparation work for that steep climb. And it's a great example from one of our airlines, actually Eurowings, I'm proud to mention, but similar concepts we had a look into preparing for the summer operation, be it this year or the year before. It literally felt like making the airline take off again on a bumpy runway. You can see many potholes on this runway, and the potholes being sort of the challenges to restart operations, coming, just to remind again, from a 1% passenger load 2 years ago. And it's these steep changes, whether down or up, but more now on the up, that are the real maybe safety challenge, but operationally first and foremost. In this case, a great example how our team in Eurowings looked into the topic. Basically did a proactive safety risk analysis as supporting the operations restart, as we called it, and in this case for technical operations. And well, looking into safety data, typically we are used to having figures, facts, sensors all around, from operations, from mechanics turning spanners, from flight operations, from voluntary confidential reporting, And all of a sudden, we are coming from nobody in the hangar, no operations. So our classic mechanisms and indicators as in sensors, they don't work. Yeah. So at the time of at the start of this runway, we had to rely on different well, sensors or new safety data sources, very much more than on a personal experience basis or maybe a chat wall rumors, because simply the technical data-driven sensors they were non-operational because there simply wasn't operation. But based on experience in setting up such restart projects, I came up with an action plan. And that action plan more or less was like rebuilding a new company. It's a full rebuild of has been a full rebuild of technical operational and personal requirements, be it in flight operations, in this case, technical operations. First of all, sensitize and activate our staff. Many of them spent months and if not years in home office or in furlough or whatever the national situation as in support measures by governments had for them, or in some cases, obviously, staff left the company and found new professions. Communication with partners and suppliers, which is predominant in the steep climb right now, just to get the message out that yes, we want to come back. And in a way, in that communication, also fighting against the wall of information that you find in the daily news. Everybody has to do their business plans. Yeah, so all of a sudden somebody comes around the corner and tells you, okay, in the midst of crisis, but in 3 weeks' time, we want to have like 30, 50, 60 planes back in operation. Can you put money down on this? Well, yes. On the other hand, volatility is the name of the game. So there's a lot of interaction, has been a requirement and continues to require with partners and suppliers. Parts suppliers, staff suppliers, tool calibration, the whole lot. It's a very interconnected business, as you all know. So that was clearly a strong focus of these restart projects. The fleet itself, being engineers, we know that, but really aircraft are not made to park, they're made to fly. AMM Chapter 10 has some ideas, but basically nature took over on airports, and all kinds of unforeseen conditions and the quantity of technical challenges all at the same time pose a challenge to engineering and production. And then finally, wanting to fly a lot and having to simply struggle for money and survival. Also the maintenance planning in our case was affected, because once you have the passengers in a very sharp summer period, you really want to make sure your fleet is flying. So also planning and scheduling, you try to max out the winter season or the maintenance in the ramp up, actually increasing to the challenges on suppliers and staff. And then finally, not to forget, it's been 2 years, so lots of trainings, updates, IT logins, all the technical stuff basically didn't work as usual. All the processes and all that had to be reset. Human factors, to close on that topic. I started on sensitization and activation, but human factors, I think in this crisis, and for all of us personally, including myself for sure, I think was taken to a new dimension. In particular, I would want to highlight factors beyond the work environment. All of a sudden, I mean, well, families found different ways of operating in the best. Yeah, so homework, why should I actually go back to office? And some things work at home, but then some things not so much on the creative side, on the process development side. Social distancing, so on the medical and hygiene element, how about getting people back into shift patterns? So that took a lot and still takes a lot of discussion and convincing and preventive measures. And on the psychological safety part, job fear, change of jobs, what's going to happen? Do I want to stay in this industry? So the challenges in that sector, I think, were predominant and stood out compared to many other crises we have gone through in the past. And overall, you have a plan, but 2 weeks later you might have a new plan because some new restriction from the COVID scenario could check in. So strong project approach, but definitely helped and aided and supported by the concepts of safety management, and also at the same time a hard test of how we traditionally do safety management, because KPI data driven or very unique HF challenges, I think they were a bit of a new flavor and still are. And that's how we approached. Finally, lessons learned. Let me wrap it up what we take as a, let's say, lessons learned and how we believe we have gone through this crisis somewhat successful. And the headline is actually not just safety management, but it's how crisis management as a headline and how to cope with uncertainty, because that saving the business first and then safety at the same time, I think those together stood out in the crisis management. 3 elements: flexibility, management of change, and action plan. Yeah, so flexibility, volatility market, I spoke about this, but I think lessons learned in our case, and maybe still a challenge to some extent, safety and flexibility are no conflict. Yeah, so lots of our regulation or more stringent approach, processes, technical setup for safety management in the classic format is somewhat stable. There's approval of documents, there's approval of manuals, there's staff licenses, etc. And many of these things were challenged all of a sudden also by the need to be flexible. And without being flexible, you're simply dead and broke. Yeah. So what's the purpose of safety if you don't exist anymore? Yeah. So I think we learned a great deal together in how to be flexible and safe. And some of this I think we can take forward and yet have some homework to do, also looking towards regulators and friends in authorities. How can we make some of these learnings as part of the new normal? Yeah, so remote audits, not ideal, but maybe some elements could be taken into a new normal just to be ready. And there's always a crisis coming up, more or less. Digital versus on-site, digital solutions have been a great help. So we do very much appreciate EASA's initiatives to look into digitization of pretty much everything in processes, but taking the lessons learned in digital solutions and making them the new norm, also on the regulation side, I think that will help greatly. And a true challenge has been and still is somehow global cooperation in the supply chain. So if your MRO is in Taiwan, you can't send anybody there because of COVID. Why can't not somebody from Taiwanese authority do the audit on behalf of? And so classic format, very much reliant on physical on-site stability, paper-based static. I think on the interfaces and working together in organizations, but supported and a great push and support needed from the regulator. I think that flexibility, global cooperation, that's where we yet have some room to improve, to really cash in on these learnings. Management of change, spoke about extent, but just to highlight here, the vast extent of this crisis, I think told, in our case, at least told us lesson how much time and focus also as a management team you need to devote, pulling strings together. The team's basically gone, and really making management of change or crisis management the one and only business priority, and include that safety element, of course, and that it will take in such crisis always be, it will always take bold and unconventional decisions to basically shut down and or ramp up fast, because it's a race against time, else you're simply broke. Action plan, yes, business safety, fine, but business priorities will have to be first, else we don't need the operation anymore. Contingency plans, be ready to work and operate constantly with 2 or 3 scenarios, like I showed on the business outlook on the first slide. Just having one scenario and assuming that you will have one steady growth line or shrink path or stable, whatever, I don't think that's going to be the new normal. But also in working together in organization, supply chain, I think we have to learn to work with multiple scenarios and keep updated and connecting. And hence, early communication is key. Do not rely on just the traffic light that tells you you have enough ground handling for the summer operations. I think we read that all in the press. But it really takes people to talk to and have a deeper understanding of how ready we really are. So that's our takeaways for the safety and crisis management, and looking forward to questions later on. But for the time being, I think I hand back to Eugenia or directly to Paolo.
Thank you, Arno. Yes, we start receiving some questions. The plan is round 1, more or less, to start having a look in detail and to have those questions with you, with the panelists, and with us. So I suggest now, again, thanks for your insights. Arnold, Paolo, are you ready? The floor is yours for your slide.
Yes, I'm ready. First of all, thank you very much to Yas and Jenny for this invitation. It's great to be here with very good experts. Thank you very much, Arnold, for your insights. And that's very interesting because although I'm coming from a business aviation sector, there is a lot of common points, as you can expect. So let me share my presentation. Okay. Can you just please confirm that you're seeing my presentation?
We confirm, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm Paulo Pistana, as Jenny presented me, I'm a regulatory manager. So I'm going to provide a perspective more from a continuing airworthiness management organization. So the organization that manages maintenance. Okay. So let's talk first about a little bit about NetJets. Oh, sorry. That's better. So what is NetJets? So NetJets, for the ones that are not very familiar with the business aviation segment, is the major, the biggest, the leader provider in business aviation worldwide. Worldwide, we have a fleet of 750 airplanes, and in Europe, we have 107 airplanes flying and operating. We fly to a lot of airports, and basically, our lema is anytime, anywhere. We operate a diverse fleet of different aircraft types. So we operate from the smallest Embraer Phenom 300 until the Global 6000. And the reason for this is we have the ideal aircraft for any mission. It could be a short travel from London to Paris for business, or could be a big journey for a family to go to holidays in the other side of the world. So we adjust the demand to have a specific request to a specific fleet type. So this provides the best efficiency in terms of delivery for exactly each owner needs. We were talking about COVID, and business aviation, it's a different thing. So first of all, business aviation is known to be a very resilient aviation sector. So we have our own cycles, and sometimes we are somewhat very different from commercial aviation. Yes, we had a drop in 2020 when everything was stopping, but our recovery was very, very fast. So the big challenge was here when we were dropping in 2020 due to the shutdown of COVID. No one knew how long we were going to be standstill. So uncertainty, it was the biggest challenge for NetJets. We have done some mitigation actions at the time, and sometimes we overreacted because after a few months, we recover very quickly. And if you look at the red line, today we are flying above 2019 levels. So today, business aviation in general is a very healthy segment. we are flying above all previous values and we are hitting records. So now our challenge is to cope with demand. So our fleets are stretched to the maximum, and we are really sometimes struggling on some days to have enough fleet, enough capacity to meet with demand. So this means that some problems that the airlines faces, like along the parking shutdown, we have not seen that. So our entire fleet, 107 airplanes, kept operating during the entire period. We have not parked not a single airplane, and we have flight volume enough to ensure that the maintenance requirements were met for the entire fleet. So that was a good outcome. We did suffer with, for example, ERC physical inspection, where no inspectors could travel. We need to follow some special exemptions that actually double the workload for us, but we were able to manage that. Looking at the challenge during the pandemic, the main thing was about the indirect effects of the COVID. So we had always demand during the pandemic. The problem is to deliver. Why? Lots of companies shut down, different rules. Every country, they have their own rules changing every day. So we had a lot of planning and replanning and replanning work to be able to fly. And sometimes we're ready to fly. We have someone waiting for the flight, but not possible because the authorities have some requirements that are not able to meet that day. Another very important problem that we have with the COVID was the supply chain disruption. We are still living that, so the situation is improving slowly, but we still live some problems. I can provide some examples. In the supply chain, for example, the suppliers for the brakes, aviation brakes, are made from carbon, and there is no carbon as raw material to refurb the brakes. So, for example, I have a shortage on brakes in several fleets. Another thing is the rubber. The rubber required for the tires. We had some important shortage in rubber. So, and of course, this stops the fleet from flying. And we are still seeing this, and especially the delivery times are huge. And now we need to plan for extended delivery times for normal components that were routine. Maintenance service providers, they suffered a lot with the COVID restrictions. As you know, a technician cannot repair an aircraft at home, working from home. So we saw big drops, not announced drops in terms of labor. And that had impacted especially our maintenance schedule inspections and AOG drop-ins, because sometimes no crews enough, it's impossible to predict what's going on tomorrow. Commercial airlines, because NetJet's pilots, they fly also commercial airlines to pick up the next jet. Yes, that was a big challenge because the airline stopped, so we don't have the normal transportation to move people and parts around. And as I mentioned, the ERC review process required additional work because, and I thanks to EASA to set forward a solution, because in the lockdown, no ERC certifiers were able to travel. So EASA prepared an exemption template that was followed by everyone, I think, where you can perform a documental review and then apply for an exemption and just postpone for 8 months the physical review. So that was a good measure to solve the problem at the time, because it was impossible for us to do a physical inspection. And by the way, NetJets, we don't have a main operating basis. So where are these 107 airplanes on NetJets? All over the globe. So actually, they can be seen in any place, Europe and outside Europe. So really, we need to travel to make the physical reviews of the airplanes. We are not returning at night to a main operating base. So yeah, we have the initial documentation review, and then 8 months later, we have the physical review. That was nice. The downside of it was the double work, because actually you need to perform twice the documentation review, because on the physical review, you need also to complete the documentation review. Fleet maintenance wise, that was almost business as usual. So no change to the maintenance programs, because you kept the minimum required fleet activity. no long parking or storage, although I share the pains from my colleagues from the aviation that the long parking and storage, it's a big discussion and the impacting the compliance with the regulations. And we had a monitoring plan to ensure that all aircraft will meet the minimum flight requirements. So what we have done is to spread out all the flight activity across the whole fleets to make sure that all aircraft were flying as required. Lessons learned from our side. I really like what Arnold said before me about the be flexible and safe. Yeah, I believe that post-COVID, you can say that the aviation industry as a whole is entering the flexibility and safety. And yes, I completely agree with Arnold that they are compatible areas, and we have tools that we need to grow and to learn better how to use them. One thing that we learn how to work is to work with our national aviation authorities for the phase-in processes optimization, and that was a big win because you manage to optimize and reduce the time required to certify new airplanes. That flexibility with the entry in force with the Part K mode. Now we have the ALTMOC, alternate means of compliance, and this is a very powerful tool to make changes, to be flexible, and while keeping the safety levels or increasing the safety margins. Safety risk assessment processes. That requires a learning curve. So I need to confess that for no one that is not used to perform a safety issue risk assessment, it requires some training, some thought. But once you understand it, it makes all the sense and makes all the discussions about the solutions and options much easier to make. Management of change is part of flexibility, as already addressed by Arnold. Use this a lot. Use this management change for aircraft configuration change, organizational changes. That's a good way for us to be disciplined in the change that we are doing in the organization, to understand upfront before they happen all the possible consequences of any change. The last bullet, and well, this is one of the reasons that I'm also at the EASA Engineering and Maintenance Technical Advisory Board, is about the work to be done in the regulatory area. You are transitioning from rule-based regulations to performance-based regulations. And now we are facing, and I have some real examples and experience, that although using SMS application and performing the safety issue risk assessment, and by demonstrating that what are you intending or proposing to do cannot be done yet because there is some rule-based regulation that blocks me. So I see that this is a learning curve for everyone, from the operators, from the authorities, but we still need some additional flexibility in the regulations and provisions to allow the performance-based, to allow the SMS systems to work at the full potential. Because if I have a means to prove that from a risk assessment that is validated and proves that my operating safety margin can be even higher, why cannot I implement that? Because there is a rule-based regulation that is blocking me. And I'm seeing this happening more and more in the future, because I'm sure that everyone will look at the ALTMOCs, will use their operations to be more flexible, more efficient, increase the safety operating margins when possible. And then we are against the wall with maybe outdated or no longer required rule-based regulations. Another advantage, and I'm finishing, this COVID was a great opportunity for NetJets to prove a point that it was possible to work from home, it was possible to have a full digitalization of our KMO processes. And it was a very good outcome, because we proved that we can manage a fleet of 107 airplanes with the entire KMO team working from home. And even as of today, you are using a hybrid model. So that means that in a week, a contributor can stay 2 days at home if that makes sense for their function. And the operation is well, and we have not seen any impact in productivity, quality, or safety. Finally, current challenges in our business aviation environment. One is clearly fatigue. So crew fatigue, office, CAMO, personnel fatigue, because the demand is being very high. You keep having problems with manpower shortage with the maintenance service centers, and the supply chain disruption is still visible. So we need to plan more in advance, and we are not at the optimal operational level. And that's what I have to share initially. Thank you.
Thank you, Paolo. Yes, really very good insights from both of you. Thank you for that. I believe we are ready now to go into more details on one of the things, some bits that you have discussed and that you just give us some information. So I would like to start with one question to each one of you, and I can make a link with one of the questions we have received in the slide. So allow me to pose the question: is how do we manage change in an environment of continuous change? The question we have in the slide is more or less the same. How do you decide if you have explored the change sufficiently to perform a robust management of change risk assessment? So again, coming to the risk management side, how, if you can give us more insight, you already touched it in your presentations, but to go into more detail. I suggest we start with Arnold, then Paolo, and then we change the order. Thank you. The floor is yours, Arnold.
I just have to hit the button first. Sorry for that. So how to survive risk management in a continuous change? Can you repeat, because I had a dropout, sorry.
Yes, how the question in the slide, which is basically the question I have already prepared for you, is to manage change in an environment of continuous change. In the slide we have this link on the how, if you have explored the change sufficiently to manage the change, sufficiently to perform a robust management of change, considering the risk assessment. You mentioned flexibility as one of the key elements here, and how to manage these changes, considering the risk assessment.
I think flexibility and accepting the flexibility as a mindset actually before going to real tools is the big step. Yeah, because we are from a mindset and perception. We are coming from plans. We are coming from structures. I mentioned it before. And fixed processes, but how to make to put a specific element on levels of certainty or uncertainty and scenarios, and practically I think it is the proactive use of scenarios, rethinking then classic safety tools per each scenario and making that a specific effort of your planning routine, be it on the operations side or be it in any functional specialization, and could be quality function, could be engineering, etc. So really making that scenario thinking an effort, and putting a specific focus on the flexibility management driven by external factors. You know. Typically, and notion from the safety risk assessments I have participated over the recent times, they're good into looking into internal causes, which risks we might have, especially in being engineering people. Yeah, we go into the details of what are the internal maybe loopholes or what we have seen before. But in this crisis, I think we learned that an external factor can basically shut you down completely within very abrupt time. So allowing or putting a specific element on a wider input and making that part of your safety risk or crisis management regime, I think, is an important element.
Thank you, Aaron. Paolo, your views, please.
Yes, that is a very good question, and that's the new world that everyone is now finding out. So first of all, management of change needs to be like it's a discipline. You need to have a structured way to do that. So we need a tool, a platform. I'll not recommend to do this using Word on an Excel spreadsheet. The things gets very complex very quickly, and you need to have a structured approach. So, for example, for the management of change, we use a team of subject matter experts, depending to the change that we're doing. We use the safety specialists to validate the approach that is being given. And of course, use also some judgment and final validation by the accountable manager. When you go to the risk assessments, for example, NetJet, we have 3 types of risk assessments because there is no silver bullet. We have a simplified risk assessment, we have a classic risk assessment, and we have a safety issue risk assessment, which follows the ARMS process. And according to the specific situation, we elect what is the most suitable change. So it could be a very simple assessment. I can make a management of change assessment in 1 hour, or I can take 2 or 3 days, depending on the complexity. And this is a process that is all set up, everyone is trained, and everyone speaks the same language. So when I need to change something, what I go is I get together with the team of subject matter experts. We have a discussion about what are the scenarios, the risk scenarios, the hazards. You go online, you load them in the platform, you discuss about mitigation actions, recovery actions, and then you go for safety for validation. So seems a lot. No, once we are used to that, I believe that the first and the second are the most difficult to do. And that's a process. And of course, we only take a decision to change when we have the validation, because one thing, of course, we have our procedures and processes in places and metrics, and we change after we are sure that the change makes sense. Because making first you change, then we evaluate the change, it's out of order. You're not making good service to the safety management system. So sometimes it could appear that, yes, we need to change tomorrow. We cannot wait 1 week for the studies. No, wait 1 week, because we need to fully understand what are the impact of the change, and then we change. That's why we always place safety first as anyone in the aviation industry. And we don't change if we're not sure about all the side impacts and collateral effects, and to know what we have to done with the change. So yeah, the change is continuous, but having the right processes, the procedures, people train, a platform, an online platform that help you out with the process, yeah, it's bearable. It's not killing. And the added value is everything is fully documented. So if something is not going according to plan, you go back to our plan and say, okay, what we miss, what we are not seeing that happen. And you can always refine it.
Yes, good point. Thank you. Yes. Allow me to give you another question, and again, it's going a bit in detail on things that both of you have already mentioned on your slides at the very beginning, and it's about how to manage the interfaces between organizations. You both manage that we are in a world where everything is interconnected, how certain things such as supply chain is affecting currently. So can I have more insights on this? Perhaps Paolo, could you start this time, please?
Yeah, thank you. That is a very good question. For example, NetJets, we don't have our own maintenance capacity. So all the maintenance is contracted 100% to the outside. That means that you need to manage more than 40 different maintenance service providers across all Europe and outside Europe. So the way to manage this, first, we have long-term agreements and contracts. We have at least a quarterly meetings at the senior level, executive level, to establish a strategy, capacity, to share with the providers what they should expect in terms of maintenance, load, challenges, modifications. Then we have a monthly calls to just the maintenance planning, and then we have up to the daily call with every provider to update them on our needs and changes to the plans. So basically, this management is one, long-term technical contracts, We have very strong maintenance technical contracts with each of them. We have a platform that we share all methods related requirements, documentation, and everything that the providers needs to know in advance. We have also parts planning in advance, and then we follow up on a daily basis with every vendor. So I'll say that constant communication all over the place. The second part is about the SMSs, and I'm really happy that finally we have the 145 embracing the SMS systems, because that makes the conversation much more simpler. Because today, when there is a safety issue or an event, we need to follow up from the KMO perspective, because it's a portable event, and you need to follow with them. With the implementation of SMSs on both sides, the KMO and the 145, we can integrate that. So that makes all the communication and the visibility of the overall picture much more fluid. And so that's it. So basically, that's constant communication and long-term agreements and strategic and tactical communication on a daily basis.
Yeah, thank you, Paolo. Good points. Arnold, may I have your views, please?
Pleasure. And Paolo, totally agree to the basic layout and how to run such a classic organization interfaces in a highly integrated but yet spread out industry. I think the additional aspect we had in this particular crisis is that somehow we were relying on so many such structures and contacts and partly automated also information exchange. And yet all of a sudden the people were gone everywhere at the same time. You know? So you can't rely on things that would normally just work. Yeah, of course. I mean, you realize in a morning call or whatever, personal communication, you will realize there is nobody. But there's also many things in supply chains, talking about parts, talking about any kind of provider information, which is somewhat partly reliant on digital exchange and information. But machines don't realize when then all of a sudden the people are not there, at least not yet. So this social distancing concept poses an extra challenge or extra highlight on the need to talk, on the need to establish personal, brief communication. Are you still there? And even more than to look at frequent interaction, action plans, follow up, and in somewhat make it a more human business again.
Aaron, if I may, you touch a very good
Sure,
point.
please.
We see with our vendors high turnover of staff. Key people that suddenly disappear, they are no longer there. So it's important for us, the operator and the KMO, to have always the full picture, because one of our job is whenever there is a new face, a newcomer to the organization, it needs to be quickly briefed what's going on, what is required, what to expect from them. So you can never rely totally on the vendor, because that vendor can simply disappear, lose all the people, and that's the initial risk. So yeah, having a strong project management, control what's going on, it's key for us to continue.
And thanks for this added aspect. And in a sense, project management is probably the best of comparison we can take. So whenever you have a go live of a new system or change or cut over, you have a very intense phase where you have like a hypercare phase or whatever the names are. But to a good part, it felt like this, or still feels like it in preparing for the summer ops or sustaining and surviving, because you can't rely on what the process has alone. Communication is key. And treat your service partners as if they were your own staff to a certain extent.
Yeah, good message, yes. Good. Well, the discussion is evolving really good. We see quite some comments in the Slido. We are ready to go for a third question before going to a Slido. And here is where, yes, for the audience, we will open a poll now. The poll is basically with the same topic, a core topic, that the coming question. It's about looking towards the future. So it was already, as I said before, it was already mentioned by Paolo and Arnold in their presentations. But still, I want perhaps to pick some main things that we can take from this discussion. And again, at the same time, for the audience, you have a poll. Please feel free to we have already selected a few potential replies, and we will look into those results once we have our panelists having their views. So now, coming back to Arnold and Paolo, looking towards the future, what lessons have we learned? Are we now better prepared for challenges similar to the ones we suffered during the pandemic? I suggest we start perhaps with Arnold and then Paolo, please. I think you are muted, Arnold.
Sorry, that's the famous clicking the button. It's a question asked quite frequently. Are we now, what have we learned? Yeah. So in our case, I showed it on the first slide, we somehow formally concluded COVID is over, but it's not over. Yeah. I think we have found a confidence in, yes, we can actually handle such extreme crisis. Yeah, really sustainably learning. Yet some work to do because we are still in the operational steering, and there's never a break because there's new stuff coming around. Yeah, so crisis management, yes, we took our lessons. I shared those, except flexibility. But really to make flexibility to elements sink more into our basic operating system, regulation, handbooks, etc. I think that is yet to come. And a lot of it is tribal knowledge, people driven, yeah, those who were in charge. So let's use that opportunity to make that part of our operating system in all fields. Then we are more resilient, and the opportunity is on our side.
Yes. Thanks, Arnold. Please, Paolo. You already provided some insights, but yes, what do you?
Yeah, yes, I was thinking on this, and actually I'd like to add something. On this, after this crisis, you learn that actually it's easier to do some changes that we're not seeing that happening quickly in the past, such as working from home. And the lessons learned is you can even improve productivity, efficiency, and the quality of work by allowing people to work from home. And the work-life balance will benefit a lot. So it will be nicer to work in a camo environment, an aviation environment, if are really able to be more flexible, to understand the needs of every contributor, and allow them to work from home, from a nice place, near the beach, you name it. So yeah, so improving work-life balance is a big thing in aviation, because maybe that's one of the reasons it's not very attractive. It's because sometimes the stress and pressure levels are high. That's one of the big lessons. So we can improve as an employer to give better life to our teams. And another lesson learned is not to completely rely in the globalization, just-in-time deliveries, contracts with vendors where they manage all the parts, all the logistics, because when the crisis comes, the suffers it's us. That's not the vendor. It says, sorry, I cannot supply, you need to wait 6 months. Are you telling me that I need to ground an airplane for 6 months? So that doesn't work. So one thing that you learn is you need to balance that, and you need really to manage the risk of it too much depending on third-party suppliers for parts, materials, and services, and not having our own capacity, our own stock, for example. Safety stock, critical parts, makes a difference, and I believe that we learn an hard lesson because unfortunately some OEMs are not up to the game. There are some problems, financial problems kicked in. Of course, that's a big challenge. So to be more resilient and think about the future, about what if A cannot provide the part B, what can you do? So that's another big lesson. And third is flexibility, as Arnold said. So it's always to be more safe, increase the safety operating margin by adding flexibility to the entire organization. And I believe we just started now this way. It's not finished.
Thank you. Yes, thank you for enforcing the main message and to provide some more insights to the ones in the presentation. we see now, probably you see as well, all of you on the screen, the results of the poll, which is, yes, a bit like unofficial, no? Just to see what the audience think of this question about, yes, the lessons learned, what worked well for you during the pandemic. And we've seen quick response to situation. It's like 60% of the answers were towards this direction, which is basically aligned with the message we were talking about, flexibility, another type of coming to some conclusions of this period. The second one was commitment from senior management. And indeed, it is something we didn't really go into detail, but yes, it is something that it has been identified by the audience. They are very close to others, no? The ones, of course, the ones we proposed there was because of a reason, no? But yes, it is still the quick response to situation as the most voted one. So thank you to the audience for helping with this poll. It gives already some indication on where we are. We are now opening a question. It will be an open question to the audience. It's expected to have a very short reply from your side. Allow us a moment. Can we have the...
Okay, Eugene, if you don't mind, I have a quick answer about the materials. Sorry, I have a question about which materials were most critical parts.
Well, opening the open question,
yeah.
I wanted to take one of these slides. I think you are taking already a good example.
Oh, sorry.
We'll,
yes.
So
please.
you can say a few words. Paolo, yes, it is very relevant. We are opening now the question. Please, the audience can say in a few words, what are the main challenges of setting up the interfaces between organizations? Few words, it's not to have a very long text. And please, Paolo, it is very relevant. Can you give us a reply to this question that it was already posed in the chat, please? In the slide.
So, Jen, the question is about what main challenges?
One thing is the open question we have for the audience,
Yes.
but they will little by little filling in. And I wanted to take as well one of the questions we have received in the Slido, and one was specifically requesting some more examples on what was the materials, what was you were mentioning before for the break,
yes.
the tire.
Yes,
so
I can answer.
So the supply chains.
I can answer that right now. What we are seeing is we are mainly seeing the shortage in raw materials for the vendors to do the overhauls and repairs of some critical components. So one of the critical components are brakes because they wear in average between 200, 300 cycles. You need to replace a brake. Shortage in tires, wheels, because there is no rubber. Actually, one of the major supplier of tires need to make an agreement in advance with another competitor to have enough rubber to supply the tires, and sometimes windshields and other parts. But I'll say that our main concern today is brakes and tires. And for you to have an idea, we're already making estimations and provisions until the rest of this year and for next year needs, because you need to put the purchase orders well in advance to make sure that we have enough materials. So that's the one with high consumption on an aircraft.
Thank you. I don't know, Arnold, if you can supplement.
Maybe, yeah, if I can, I mean, fully support, but in the way the list of priorities is always by the frequency of need. Yeah, so wheels and tires are always first hits, and raw materials probably the driver. On top of it, now electronics shortages, which we know from other industries, seem to arrive somehow to aviation, but that's only the parts side. On the people side and the expertise, I think whether it's OEMs, external MRO providers, they are very much in the same boat as we are as line maintenance organizations or anywhere operations. People are just gone. Yeah, and if you find people back, then well, it's not the same people with not the same qualification, expertise. and that's a joint mission to somehow win the general public back for aviation after 2 years. And I think we gave well, not the most attractive signals to the employment market, but yeah, let's win back the general public for the aviation sector, which is a great place to be, and that's the struggle to win the team back.
Sorry, Jenny, I forgot just to add to this part.
Yes.
Another area that we suffer a lot is about parts shipping. We still have a huge percentage of parts shipped from the West into Europe. And our shipping agents, they struggle a lot to find a place in the belly cargo to ship the parts. Why? Because we have much less belly cargo available, and there is a lot of parts that are waiting for shipment. So that's a second challenge for us. So what usually takes a 1 day to be shipped from the West into Europe, today can take 5 days.
Thank you. Very clear message and good examples. Thank you. Yes, let me go and check this open question we put for the audience on the slide and what the result was. What are the main challenges of setting up the interfaces between organizations? So you see here in very nice manner the main questions or the main answers we are receiving. So the most popular one is communication, which is fully aligned with the messages that you have been given, Paolo and Arno. Standardization is another the theme that is being mainly identified as something that is challenging in the interfaces. Here I take one of the comments that Paolo was making before about how the communication is easier with the introduction of the SMS in 145. So this goes along with the standardization and clear communication. This is the third message. So yeah, communication, we can see this is the key element, again, identified by you. Thank you for that.
And it's funny, interestingly, we've done a few of these word clouds this week, and communication, coordination, and lots of versions of the same thing come out like they've never come out in sessions in the same level before, which has been really interesting. That matches all of the other sessions as well.
That's really good. So yes, we are ready now to take one of the questions that we have in the slide. I saw, allow me to see, yes. Can we then stop this one and we can see the questions back, please?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, there is one, wow, you see, 16 people already voted for this one.
Yeah, I can answer to that, Jenny.
About to ask you very kindly to provide.
I believe that is a subject already familiar. I can provide an example. One example is the flight crew to perform maintenance procedures within the MEL for aircraft dispatch. So NetJets flies a lot to remote places, and sometimes to defer a fault, you need to perform a maintenance procedure. The maintenance procedure could be as simple as pulling a circuit breaker. And if you look at the regulations, there is a process which is having a part 145 to do an authorization and qualification for the flight crew to do this specific maintenance procedure. What is the problem? We NetJets, we are not a part 145, we are a CAMO. So of course we apply for an outmock, we ran a full safety risk assessment. We demonstrated that the flight crew is completely able to pull a circuit breaker. So there is not a safety problem on that. However, we are a CAMO. So because there are no provisions on the CAMO area to certify an authorized crew to do any sort of maintenance actions, we were blocked by the regulation. This is just one example. So what it proves is, even if you show that you are right with the outmock proposal, sometimes you cannot go forward because the regulation, there is a wall between us.
Thank you, Paolo, for the feedback. The question was more leading the examples of regulations that block the implementation of SMS. I would say your example is about blocking the implementation of SMS.
Yeah, let me clarify, Jenny. Maybe I was not clear in my. There is no problem about the SMS implementation. there is problems to implement the outcome of the SMS implementation. i.e., example, ALTMOC, alternate means of procedure, requires a risk assessment. Then the outcome of the risk assessment shows that you can perform a action. However, the regulation may not allow it. So I don't see any problem in the implementation of the SMS itself, but the implementation of the outcomes of the risk assessments generated within the SMS system, just to be clear. The SMS is fine and it's completely
not the
clear.
SMS itself, it's the implementation.
Yeah, that's the outcome. We have problems implementing the outcomes.
Isn't always possible in that context, depending on the way the organisation is set up.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Thank you for the help.
Yes, I would like to open now another poll. And then the panelists can already see the next question about SPA KPI indicators. So perhaps it will be the next question that I will make. Okay, this is an open question. It is not a poll. So for this open question, what could be a main hazard in your view regarding maintenance? And then we will wait for having some more replies to this one, and then we will come back to the question I was identifying as very popular. I will give the floor while we are receiving some of your feedback to my colleague John, because John, perhaps you can mention this coming event. It's
probably a good time. So we've been talking, as we were talking there, about solutions and SMS and that kind of thing. So obviously, so this safety week, we're specifically focusing on challenges and solutions and that kind of thing. But then while people are answering this, it's worth mentioning also that we have another event called Safe 360 that's more on the sort of safety issue side. So a bit like this question actually is, what are the top safety challenges we face, and do we agree on what the key priorities are? And what Safe 360 is a physical event that we're holding at a hotel in Brussels from the 13th to the 15th of September, where we will, the idea is to get as many people in a room as we can. Chatham House rules kind of lock the doors and say, okay, do we agree on common challenges between different domains at the interfaces, in specific domains, and then have that opportunity at that event to share these challenges. And then that leads on then to, it's kind of part of a cycle then that will come back hopefully to Safety Week next year, where we then say, okay, what have we learned? How can we support then implementation? So if you look at particularly the European Safety Plan, this is the, are we all worrying about the right problems part in Safety Week, in Safe 360, as opposed to Safety Week, which is how do we implement the solutions part. So, yeah.
Thank you for this update, yes. In the meantime, you can see on your screen, and in fact, I like to see so many contributions. Allow me to highlight the ones that receive more votes, or at least are more popular in the audience. Again, the question was, what would be a main hazard in your view regarding maintenance? Commercial pressure is identified at the biggest one. Time pressure, skills degradation, workload, parts availability. These are the 5 main ones. There are quite a number. You see on your screen, there are quite a number identified there, but these 5 ones are the ones collecting the main topics that are identified by you. May I have your views on this one very quickly, and then we make this link to the KPIs that was identified in the if we come back, please, again to the slide of questions. Yes, you see there what kind of KPIs indicators that you see in the worthiness area. Considering the replies we already saw in this open question, what are your views here? Who wants to start? I'm open here.
I can start now.
Please, Paolo.
Okay, I'm looking at the slide. And these times are challenging, and there's something that we cannot lose out of sight, which is safety is an absolute value, it's not relative. So I'm not following, for example, the ones that said parts availability is an hazard. If there is no part, there is no plane. A plane is grounded. Should do it 1 week? Yes, no question. So I'll say that's this pressure, commercial pressure, time pressure, my response was pressure, requires a strong safety culture and a strong work ethics. And work ethics is never to cross the line. So I don't have a part, aircraft is grounded. Oh, but we have 1,000 passengers and 3,000 flights, doesn't matter. Aircraft is not airworthy, stop. And that's the most important thing is to have this pressure to degrade the safety attitude, and especially if there's any attempt to try to relativize the safety thing. It's not big thing, it's a minor thing, no problem. And that's where the devil kicks in, and that's a big risk. But yeah, pressure is all over the place. And as a CAMO, for example, we feel responsible for everything that our vendors are doing. Sometimes you ask him, hey, are we putting too much pressure on you? It's reasonable what I'm asking to you. Do you need more time? Do you need to think? Let us, how do you feeling? Because sometimes we need to stop, because otherwise this can be out of control, and that's it. That's origin for all problems.
Thank you. Arnold, your views? Considering, again, what we saw in this open question, where we saw this commercial pressure, time pressure, skills degradation, parts availability, we already saw your feedback, Paolo there. So what are your views? Thank you.
I think it's about phases. We had in the initial phase a buzzword called rusty pilots and rusty mechanics. So before the time pressure in the first ramp up of operations actually started, I think we were very much on different risks, psychological safety, looking at the change of work environment, things to an extent of work environment coming back to work, where things are new, systems were upgraded, and in that sense, overconfidence at times, because from memory, I mean, you're very happy to be back, but at the same time, things have changed, and somehow you fall into this trap. Yet, but I know, but really, you don't know, because you're a rusty mechanic or rusty pilot or whatever rusty. Yeah. So absence over such a long time, as has been in case of COVID, in the commercial sector, at least in Paolo's case, we saw the ramp up rather fast. But that was an additional element in the first phase. And now we are clearly 1 or 2 steps ahead, that commercial pressure and all these things we heard is more frequently the safety hazards. I would underline that. But the specific notion here was the long absence, which was well, unprecedented, at least in our case.
And I don't know if I can help on the KPI, SPI thing.
Please.
So one of the things actually links quite nicely to the next question below it about reporting. So certainly what I've seen in the past, so my background historically was particularly in maintenance in various contexts, and particularly in terms of safety investigation. And one of the things we saw in terms of SPIs is kind of the first level is identifying is effectively monitoring the outcomes, so the different types of whether it's maintenance error or damage events and things like that. And one of the first challenges then is, do you have the reporting culture that people will tell you when mistakes have happened in the first place, and how you act as an organization. Ultimately, most people don't go to work to do a bad job, and nobody does really. So the more you can encourage people to report events, because in most cases the causes of that will be related to just things in time pressure, all of the things we saw, those kinds of things in that word cloud, lots of organizational factors and kind of general human factors. And then this is where, particularly at a second level in terms of SPIs, and MEDA is a great tool that I've seen many maintenance organizations use very effectively, is then to be able to say, well, do an effective investigation so you can identify and then use as SPIs some of the more human factors like time pressure and things like that, and it doesn't, you actually start to identify more of the factors that you can actually solve rather than just knowing, well, I had lots of bad things happen, if that makes sense.
Thank you, John. I think with these 3 questions or 3 replies, we have nicely covered at least this question that is identified in the first point that we just answered, the current reporting question as well, and the one on the mail is in continuous with the main. I think we have already covered this.
Yeah, that's quite good.
So I would like to go to the next one, which is, what kind of technical issues were the most prominent when the aircrafts were on the ground? And issues regarding nature, I assume then that it is regarding birds building nests, is a question mark. May I have your views here or your experience? You, Paulo, mentioned in your case there were not really long storage times. I don't know, period of time. So this is what I got from your presentation, but perhaps you have some information here.
That's true. I could add something to it. Yeah, sometimes I have some issues related to aircraft being on the ground. Bird nests, yes, we are seeing bird nests on some specific fleets. I don't know, but the birds have preferences from the aircraft types. I don't know. But yeah, we do see them. Another problem that sometimes we have is about batteries and the charging of batteries, because we have a procedure that when the aircraft is not in operation for more than 2 days, the battery should be disconnected. However, it's not always possible. So batteries decharge, that's another problem. And it's pretty much it. So I'm not saying, well, as you said, we don't have the experience of long-term parking issues. Of course, we have especially our concerns and challenges, which is to everything needs to be covered. The P2 covers needs to be in place, static covers, engine covers. That is crucial and paramount, and that's something that is we are always concerned that make sure that everything is properly protected. But aside that, we don't have many other technical issues. Maybe Arnold can help in this.
Thanks, Paolo. I don't know, Arnold, you want to say a few words? If not, I will go to one question that it's really linked to your presentation. So you want to say a few words, or if not, I go to the next question.
Agree to Paulo's, and then there's always the classics. Be it on the fuel or any fluid over time. I mean, we have the classic topics, and actually on the reactivation, depending on time and location, the special challenge in this particular crisis was the sheer quantities, 700 planes down. You could not always fly them to ideal storage locations where it's dry and hot and deserts, but realistically, with a sort of a reactivation, parking, storage regime, some aircraft sadly had to be in a more humid or even saline atmosphere, which brings the whole corrosion and decay of planes. Planes are made to fly and not to be stored at in humid locations. So not unheard of, but the sheer quantity, and options where to park.
Yes, thank you for complementing the reply. I will go now to, I was referring before, there is one question about one of your slides, the one that you presented, Arnold. It's about this new forecast, 2 weeks versus 3 months. Have you reviewed all your existing processes and how did you adapt? I think, again, this goes along with the flexibility, and I understand probably, as Paulo was mentioning, this change management with the processes, but I don't know if you want to say a few words, Arno, to answer this question.
Well, I take the two weeks forecast as a, let's say, iconic statement, but thinking back to COVID times, and health regulation, that was really the pacemaker. German-based operations, we were very much reliant on, probably similar to everybody else, on government decisions on where can we fly to, what are the health regulations, more stringent or less stringent. So that dictated basically the flight plan, the size of operations, either going up or going down. So market pace or volatility in the market basically dictates your operational processes, not by definition, but as in terms of need for staff, maintenance, flight crew planning, etc. And then the challenge is how to maybe rethink your planning process, whereas typically you would have, I don't know, a 3 months outlook and resource planning to that. How can you flexibilize this and having a contingency or multiple scenarios and a shorter communication to actually deliver? That connects very much to pulling all strings together, crisis management. And we do obviously have a crisis management, or everybody has a crisis management process. And some elements of this, I think we now can carry forward to the new normal.
Thank you. I suggest we take only one more question, although, yeah, I have to say I'm impressed because we are receiving quite items, and I would like just to wrap up the session. But let's take one more question and then I wrap up. The most popular one that we have right now is what examples of reference data are most effective and representative when used for airworthiness, SPIs.
Maybe I could start.
Paolo?
Today we are talking about safety management systems and SMSs. So I'd like to say that a good SMS to run needs to have blood, and blood is reporting rates. So that's one of the key. And to support that, you need to understand that you need to implement a just culture policy within the company. The one reporting needs to understand that reporting is good. Reporting is an opportunity. Reporting is positive. And this is a big clash of cultures. You have the classic culture and the new culture. And having everyone in the organization understanding that reporting is good, if I'm reporting my own mistake, well, if it was non-intentional, so we have a definition in the just culture, what is acceptable and what not is acceptable. Basically, non-intentional errors are okay if you learn from them. So I'll say reporting rate is one starting, because there is no, Arnold mentioned that. If you have an empty hangar, no one reports. No one reports, we don't know what's going on. You are blind. It's like a radar without any targets. So reporting, I'll say reporting rate is key. Then with the part cameras, we have the risk register. So we have a risk register with all the risk classification per events. Of course, we monitor the vendor's error rates, the camera error rate, the parts issue error rate. So you need to track what's happening, what is improving, what is not improving, what needs action. And then from airworthiness management, we can think about aircraft availability, aircraft recovery time, technical dispatch reliability, and so on and so on. But also for SMS, reporting rate is clearly one of the most important things. Actually, if I may just call a quick story. 1 year ago, we were called to our National Aviation Authority, and they asked, why are you reporting so much? And you told them, well, we are reporting so much because we have a developed just cultural environment and everyone is invited to report everything. Okay, thank you. So you don't have a special safety concern? No. We are okay. We are confident that our system is working well. Okay, thank you. So that's it. Just culture.
Good example. Arnold, a few words and then I will.
Very happy to actually support that statement. And from a previous assignment I had, I think it actually, the challenge is to somehow make it a sporty challenge between parts of the organization. You can somehow measure how many reports you get per staff operating, and have a sporty challenge in minimum one a week, or and hearing nothing is actually the problem. So changing that paradigm, there's a problem, so it's bad. Similar to what Paulo said, if you're being asked from outside many reports, is it a problem? Let's celebrate reports and make it a sporty challenge. Who contributes the most to safety and learnings, and reframe that topic. So that's how we deal with data also. Do we just send out reports, what was reported, or somehow maybe produce graphs that show like a soccer league table, a soccer league chart, who has the most reports per active staff operating? There can be some clever ways of persuading that message. That's number one. And number two, maybe new ways of reporting, or, well, if you don't have any staff operational, I think we can take that human element, or have to take human element back in. Just a shop floor walk, talk to people, have a coffee. It's not statistics, not data driven, but re-establish that human link. Some companies I've seen rumor walls where people are invited to take a pen, write their thought on a wall, and then management comes around and writes an answer back, and somehow establish other ways of communication. Because in the midst of crisis, what we also have is that psychological safety issue, or the sheer outright fear about employment. Yeah, and I think we can try to support a reporting culture to the extreme, but then really it's a very strong crisis like we've seen. We have to be mindful that maybe some other elements to connect with people, we are social animals, is important. And anonymous, there's many ways, not just typing questions in or typing into a reporting tool, but let's think about empathy, how to stay contact, classic cup of coffee, shop floor walk, and engage and encourage, and it's leadership.
Completely agree, Arnold. Sometimes a coffee works more than 100,000 reports.
Yes, it's really difficult to finish with a better note. So allow me just to say a few words, like key messages that we saw today. It's not really trying to summarize in just one sentence of what you said, because it was really a lot of very fruitful discussions and insights. One of the things we took is that, yes, the pandemic is not over, but in certain cases, some parts of the things are already over. So, but yeah, unfortunately, there are other crises. We had a lot of flexibility. We had a lot of communication. We had this notion, aviation after COVID has evolved. Safety and flexibility are not incompatible. Management of change, flexibility, a structured approach for those changes. And yes, just to finalize, I have to highlight that this reporting discussion that we just had, it's really in the high note. So from our side, yes, just a big appreciation to our panelists, Paolo, Arnold, Paolo, a pleasure to work with you, a pleasure to have the audience with us. And yeah, I hope you found this webinar interesting, and thank you for being there.
And dare I say, I didn't pay Arnold any money at all to finish with the words leadership, knowing that in 25 minutes at 1400 CET, we're going to be back for our last session on safety, culture and leadership. So yeah, I couldn't have summed it up. Thank you for leading on in that way. Fantastic. Thanks, everybody. And see you all soon, and we'll post the material when we can. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
Thank you, everybody, and have a good afternoon. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.